My name is Princess Hill, and my story is going to be about overcoming childhood sexual abuse. I was sexually assaulted from the time I was 3 until I was 13. I was sexually assaulted from a family member, and then when I was about 6 or 7, that's when I met my sister's father, and my sister's father began to touch me. He began to perform oral sex on me and things like that. And then when I turned about 10 or 11 is when he took my virginity. At first, it was like a game because he was just spending the night over the house, and then he started to live at the house. He came into my room. He was like, oh, let's play a game. So we started to play a game, and he started to say that I was his girlfriend. And this is when I was about 7. So and then when I was about 8 is when he started to perform oral sex on me. Then when I was about 10 or 11 is when he asked me if I was ready for him to basically take my virginity. He would say like, you know, we're going to be together forever. At 11 years old, I just felt like it wasn't real love. I felt like I was just something for him to use or to just play around with. I was fearful of my environment. So being sexually assaulted as well pushed me to, when I would run away. And when I was 13 years old, I ran away probably like my last time. And this is when my father came to pick me up. And my father knew that I was being abused by my sister's father. He said, okay, I'm going to go hurt him. I'm going to protect you. He put on this whole thing like I was going to be protected and safe. But that same night that he got me is the same night that he also molested me. What he did was he came into my room and he began to like pull my pants down. After he had sexual encounters with me, then he left me alone. And the next morning, like before the daylight came out, he came into my room again and he proceeded to touch me again. And when he touched me again, he stopped and he said he's really sorry. He said, well, I thought that you were lying. I thought that you were still a virgin. And then he said, I'm just going to take you back to your mother's house or whatever. I can't take care of you. And when I was in a car with him, he looked at me and he said, you do know that there are men who have children with their daughters. And he said, no one's ever going to love you the way that I will love you. And he said, when you get older, you know, we can be together and I can love you the right way. And it just really made me a confused child even more. And I just always like didn't want to go to school. I hated being at school. So I would be truant, I wouldn't go. And then one day, one of the social workers noticed that I was not coming. Well, one of the counselors noticed, so they called the social worker. So the social worker pulled me into the classroom, well, into a private room. And she asked me, why am I missing school and what is going on? And at that time, people in my family already knew I was being abused, but everybody would say like I was a problem child. I didn't think anybody cared or would believe me. So I said, well, I mean, I'll tell you, but I don't think that you'll believe me either. So I told her what was going on. And from that point, she just went like full like beast mode. She contacted the police. She contacted the family members. So at this time, I was 13. The social worker got the detectives involved. Detective did believe me, of course. So what she did was, first she went after my sister's father. Now, my father, he got me to basically tell them it didn't happen because he said, well, I know you're in an abusive environment. He said, I know you want to get emancipated. And he said, well, if you tell them I didn't touch you or do anything to you, I will help you get out of the abusive environment that you're in, help you get an apartment. For some reason, I thought that was like the answer to my prayer. So I said, okay. But then I got a call from my aunt. So when she called me, she was crying and she said, you know that your dad also molested me too. See, I always thought I was the only one that these predators did things to, but he molested children before he met me. So when it came to my father and that call with my aunt, she specifically reminded me of my little sister that's through my father. My little sister was probably 6 years old at the time. So she said, if you let him go, what about your sister? What about him sexually assaulting her? And that made me really think that I can't just let him get away with that. I have to speak up. So I did tell the detectives that I was lying, that he did do something to me. I just took it back because I was trying to protect him. But in the midst of all that, the detectives went to my sister's father. And when they went to my sister's father, he immediately confessed. He wrote a 4-page letter about everything that he did to me. And in that letter, he let like everyone know I was not acting out just to act out because there was so much gaslighting going on. There was so much blame going on. So that really, I thought that would free me, but it still didn't, of course, because I was still stuck in a cycle of abuse with my family. When I ran away at 11, I would sneak and stay with the boy that was closer to my age in the neighborhood. He would sneak me in his house because he knew that my sister's father was sexually assaulting me, and he even offered to go like fight him and protect me. But because he was young and I thought that he would like not be able to win, I just told him don't do that. So he would just sneak me in the house with him. But he had school, so because he had school too, I couldn't stay in his house. So while he would go to school, I would just walk around. I lived in Philly, so we have like the L train. So I would just walk around and like sit under the L. I met another man, and this man said, "Hey, like, what are you doing out here?" He said, "You can come stay with me. I'll adopt you." And words like that to me, when I was young, when someone would say they would adopt me or that they love me, it made me feel so special because I never had that type of love. So I was thinking again, like, oh, okay, I can start a new life with this person, with this strange man. He gave me some to sell so I could make some money. I stayed there for about 2 weeks until I started to mess up the money because I felt like possibly somebody was giving me something, because at a certain time of the night, I would just fall asleep. And when I would wake up, the drug that I had that the person gave to me to sell, it would be like ran through. It's like somebody like burnt like the tip of the bag or something to take out and then put something else in there. And then the money was missing. So it was a multitude of both things. I was messing up the money and the missing. So the woman's daughter, she was in her 20s, of course, and she said, okay, you have to go because you're messing up his money and this can look bad on you. Like, this is not a game, this is serious. And she gave me like $30 to leave with, so I left with that. And at that point, I went back to my home. And when I went back to my home, the stuff still stayed the same. My sister's dad would just make it seem like I was the problem child, I was the bad child. And then I ended up pregnant. But I was not pregnant by him. I was pregnant by the boy that was in my neighborhood. And I was very happy to be pregnant because I wanted to love something and give my child everything that I didn't have. And I was just really excited to be a mom. And the boy I was dating, he was excited to be a dad. I felt two different ways. I felt one, freedom from being abused and not being told what to do and being able to just walk around and be outside. So I was homeschooled, but I wasn't allowed to be outside either. I wasn't allowed to play with the children, and I ended up staying with like different people and during those times. So for me, it was freedom. It was freedom from the people who were originally abusing me. The boy that was my age was the only person that didn't harm me or cared about me, but his family tried to keep him from seeing me, so which forced me to have to find other people's houses to live in or ask somebody, can I stay with them? So it was freedom, but it was also fear because I didn't want to be raped again. I didn't want to be told what to do again. I didn't want somebody touching me. I kept running into situations where men would grope me and touch me and do things to me that made me feel very uncomfortable. After I began running away, me and my boyfriend found out that I was pregnant. It was something that we actually did plan. We did plan it because of everything I was going through and because he also felt like he wasn't loved like properly. So we both agreed that we would have a child and love our child. So I was happy. Everyone in the neighborhood heard rumors that I was pregnant. So when the word got back to my sister's father, something else happened. So someone kicked me in my stomach down the steps. And when they kicked me in my stomach down the steps, they purposely did that because people thought that it was my sister's father's baby and they did not want there to be any proof of him molesting me. So that destroyed me because I pleaded with everyone and I told them that it was not his, it was my boyfriend's. It was something that I created. I went out in the world and found my own love and I created my own child. Having to be attacked then lose a child, it was so much blood coming out of me. I was scared. No one wanted to take me to the hospital because again, they wanted to keep it all a secret. So because I was not treated properly with medical care, I just sat in pain and in blood. And I also just had to deal with the fact that I was not going to be a mom like I really wanted to. At 11 years old, I had this strong desire to be a mother because I truly wanted to just love something the way that I was not loved. So my boyfriend was basically torn apart from me. So me and him were not allowed to speak to each other anymore. So he went on and created a new life. Of course, he was young. So I didn't go back to public school until I was 12, going on 13. So when I went back to public school, I would hear about him dating another girl, and that did hurt my feelings, but I just let it go, and I just continued on, focusing on just trying to get out the house I was in. I didn't want to go to school. I didn't want to do any of the things I was doing. The only thing I wanted to do was figure out a way to create an income or to get a job. When I was 13, I moved in with my father, and the first night I stayed with him is the first night that he sexually assaulted me. We were both watching a movie. It was just me and him in a room. But in my thinking, I felt like, okay, this is my dad, so my dad would never harm me, because he already knew what my sister's dad did to me. So we were just watching a regular kids movie, and then I fell asleep, and I woke up in the middle of the night, and he was grinding on me, and he pulled down my pants, and he proceeded to sexually assault me. And from that point on, I got up and I went into my little sister's room. She was not there at that time. It was just his wife and her son there. So my sister's room was free. So I went in there to lay down, because I couldn't believe like what just happened. I had to process that, because to me at that time in my life, people always told me I looked just like him. I was his twin. It felt really sick to me. So I stayed in that room, and then before like daylight came up, he came into the room again, and he proceeded to put his fingers inside of me. And when he did that, he stopped himself and he said, "I'm really sorry." And he said, "I thought that you were, I didn't know that you was really being sexually assaulted." He said, "I didn't know that was really going on with you. And I apologize, and I won't do that again." When daylight came up, we ate breakfast, like everything was normal. And then he said, I can't take care of you. He said, "I have to take you back basically to where my stepdad lived." He said, I'm going to take you back there because I can't take care of you." And I said, "Well, you said I could stay here." And he said, "Well, you can't stay here, and I'm just going to be a part of your life. I'm going to help you, and we're going to get emancipated, and you want to get your own place." So as he's driving me back to where my stepdad lives, as he's driving me back, he tells me that, "You do know men have children with their daughters." And then he proceeded to say, "No other man is going to love you the way that I'm going to love you. So when you are an adult, you are basically to be with me. Like, we're basically going to be together." So it was just weird, because by him telling me that, it messed up a lot of things for me. It took me a very, very long time to heal. And it only took me a long time to heal because I was still involved in a cycle of abuse. So since I was 9 years old, I was always being told that I had to leave. Since I was 9 years old, I was always being told to find somewhere else to go, pack your things and get out. So 9, 10, 12, 15, 16, all these different ages, I'm packing my things in a plastic bag, and I'm taking the bag, and I'm going to go stay with a friend or outside. I'm just going to go stay somewhere. So with that being said, my whole entire life, I was told to get out. So the very last time that I was told to get out was the last time I never went back. When I was told to leave again at 18, I went back for a little bit. But then when I turned 20 years old and I was told I have to leave again, I promised myself I would never ever go through that again, because I deserve better. So I started to get therapy about 19. So between 18 and 20 is when I started to develop my strength to go ahead and go out on the world on my own. But I started to get therapy at about 19 years old. So therapy helped me to express what I was going through. I was able to just sit and talk about it, and I was able to be angry or ruminate or whatever it is I had to do to get it out. My therapist was there to hear me out and listen to me. From all those different things, and when I was 20 years old, throughout my development, throughout my childhood, I gained so much weight. And when I was 20 years old, I moved into my very first apartment. And when I moved into my very first apartment, it was the most scariest thing, but yet the most freeing thing. I was so happy, but fear always creeped in because I was always having housing insecurities. I was always dealing with, am I going to have a homeless? I was always dealing with these things. So me having this apartment, it was nice, but all I kept doing was thinking about, I'm going to be evicted. I'm going to be kicked out. And I only stayed at this apartment for 2 years. And within those 2 years, I decided to start losing weight. I decided to exercise. I applied for school. So within this 2 years, I did get faced with eviction twice. And the very last eviction, I couldn't fight it. So I just went and I stayed in a room with my aunt until I knew if I was going to school or not. Well, I was already accepted for school, but until I knew my move-in date and things like that, because I was homeless at that point. So even though like my aunt let me stay in her room, but she said that was just temporary. She said I couldn't stay there. So when I was in therapy at 19 years old, I learned so many different things. I learned that I did have depression, and this is what I'm saying is in the past now. During that time, my therapist educated me on my depression, my anxiety, my eating habits, my self-esteem, and also me being re-victimized because I was with an abusive partner. I was with an addict. He would also hit me. He would just try to break me down so hard because he also knew what I was going through. So my therapist was a reflection to show me that I am repeating these patterns. I am involving myself with people who are a reflection of the trauma that I have experienced. And my therapist and having that therapy let me sit down and actually sit with myself to come to grips that I have the choice. And even though it's hard, at first it'll be hard to walk away. But once you start and once you get the momentum, it gets easier. So once I decided to break up with my ex addict, once I decided to leave him alone, once I decided to focus on myself, my life began to get better day by day, piece by piece. Yeah, so when you are sexually assaulted during your childhood, and I really love Freud. Freud is like someone who I truly look up to, and he talks about children and their erogenous zones and things like that. Sex can either be pleasurable or it can be a horrible experience. And because I went through all this type of abuse as a child, now when I am 18 years old, now that I'm a young adult out in the world, I had issues in a personal relationship. I had issues with sex. I had issues with PTSD, with being triggered and things like that. I developed all these different issues from the abuse that it took a long time for me to come to grips with it, and for me to begin to purge myself, and for me to begin to heal myself, because I continued to attract partners who were abusive towards me, who were toxic towards me. And it's a cycle of abuse. And the ACEs score states that the ACEs stands for adverse childhood experiences. What a child goes through, physical, sexual, emotional abuse, these things are 50% likely to be re-victimized and come up again in their life as an adult. And that science and those statistics was showing in my life, and the actions and the things that I was actually doing. My anger, I had anger, suicidal. I attempted suicide before. So I constantly went through these spells and these cycles of just going from highs to low. I was processing these things with my therapist. I would ruminate a lot. I would constantly tell her exactly what a person did to me and how I felt. And she would constantly remind me, she would hear me out and let me express myself. But I could not distinguish personality disorders at that time. So when I'm processing these things with my therapist, I'm constantly telling her how I would treat people, what I would do to people. I would never abuse my child, or I would never do this. And it would just be a ruminating cycle until one day she explained to me, she really explained like what a narcissist is and what, those type of personality disorders are by just using a restaurant. She just used basically a restaurant as an example to me to help me understand the fact that when people want something, or if you want something, if you're going somewhere and you're excited to get it, but this person is basically just dangling it in front of your face. She expressed to me and showed me that me being a child and me wanting love, me reaching for that love, me begging for that love, it was normal. But the people that I was begging for it from and begging for change from, they were never going to give me that love as a restaurant. If you go there and you want something, you want a cheesecake or whatever, and you see it's on the menu, but they tell you we don't have it, and you go back every day and they still tell you they don't have it. It's the same thing. I see these people, I see these parents, I see that you're supposed to love me, you're supposed to protect me, and every day I'm asking them, why don't you do this? Then I'm going to my therapist, and she's showing me that no matter how many times you ask and say why, it's not going to change. You can stay in that same cycle, or you can just put it down and move on. And that's what I had to do, because if I didn't put it down, I would have still kept going in circles, just asking them why, like, what is wrong with me what is wrong with me for me to have both of my parents, treat me like that? What did I do for me to have to experience both sides of the fence as a as a bad dealing. Like I felt like at the time I was just dealt cards that was not fair. I just felt like I was not able to live a normal life like other children my age or other teenagers my age, other young adults had that support even when. So I don't want to go on, but that's how I felt at the time. I graduated college. I had my master's degree in clinical social work. Right now I am a clinical counselor, and I'm also an author. I just wrote a book. I just wrote a trauma children's book, but we all have trauma. Well, everyone who has an inner child and who has experienced trauma, my book is for you, so that way you can know that you're not alone. And I'm also a coach. So I'm an author, I am a clinical counselor, and I'm also a coach to help people get to exactly where they want to be, because I have also done those steps and I know what it's like to go through different things. I wrote this book. It's called Trauma That Metamorphoses into a Butterfly. This is for any child that has already been abused sexually, verbally, physically, emotionally, any neglect. But also, we all have an inner child. So even though it's a children's book, it's for anyone who has experienced trauma. And it is available on Amazon. I would like to say to all the survivors out here, if you have experienced any trauma, it's not the end of your story. And you can metamorphose your trauma and you can heal. Healing is a lifelong journey. There's going to be constantly things that pop up that's new that you want to make better or fix or whatever, and that's fine. But as far as the deep-rooted pain, when you speak about it, you release it. If you take it to your grave, if you never talk about it, it stays there within you. And it comes up in places when you least expect it. When you suppress something, it's going to still come up. So I would say to all the survivors out there, don't be afraid. Don't let anyone silence you, because that's the type of world we live in. People don't want you to speak up about what you've gone through. But I would say speak about it. The more you speak about it, the more you're going to release it, and you're healing yourself. You're doing two things. You're healing yourself, but then you're showing other people who might look up to you, who might have had a similar experience. They might hear that you've gone through that, and you give them the courage now to go speak about their own pain, and for them to know I'm not alone. Because sometimes we think we're alone. That's how I felt when I was a kid. I felt like I was the only one going through this, but you're never the only one. The last thing I would like to discuss is because, like I stated, 2 of my abusers were in prison. One abuser was let go. There's a law that states that before an abuser is let go, the victim, that we are not victims, we are victors, but the victim is able to testify and speak their truth about the situation. I'm saying this because one of my abusers was let go, but my father is still in prison, and I had to go to court last year just to testify again. So I just want to say this, that if you are dealing with having your abusers come out or having to still go through this court process, I would also say speak to someone about that, get some kind of help, because that's another level of fear. Because at first for me, it was very fearful to know that, oh, he's out. I have one out and one in. And what if that one comes out next? So I lived in a place of fear for a while around that, but it's nothing to be afraid of, because there are laws to protect you. There are people to help you. So just reach out and see what the guidelines are. And yeah, I just want to say that, and just educate yourself around that. Reparenting yourself will give you back those same energies of having, a mother or a father, whatever it is that you may have lacked in your childhood. You can pour that energy back into yourself, because your brain does not know what is happening in real life and what is fake. So you can visualize anything you want, heal yourself, and know that you can be everything that you wanted to be, or everything that you wished you had. You can be that for someone else, but ultimately you can be that for yourself first. Be your own victorious lover of yourself. And when you love yourself fully, the universe, God, whatever you believe in, will give you that reflection. So my biggest thing to all the survivors is truly find a way to love yourself. It's the most freeing thing you will ever experience.